A young police deputy vanished in the frozen ravines of Timberline Ridge. One gunshot shattered the silence, then another. The men who pulled the trigger believed the storm would finish what they started, that the mountains would erase her without a trace. But high above Snowbridge, where the wind howls like a warning, a Navy SEAL walking with his German shepherd felt something change. That night, one choice would expose a chain of lies buried beneath the ice, involving power, greed, and a town that trusted the wrong people. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and if stories of courage, loyalty, and second chances move your heart, please subscribe for more stories like this. Winter pressed hard against Snowbridge, Montana, coating every rooftop and quiet street in layers of white silence. Timberline Ridge, towering, wind-carved, and unforgiving, loomed above the small town like a frozen monument. Snowflakes drifted steadily, catching the pale morning light before melting against the warm breath of anyone daring enough to walk outside. The cold was the kind that stung straight through a jacket, the kind that sharpened instincts. Deputy Ainsley Cross, 25, moved along the narrow Timberline access road with focused purpose. She had a compact, agile build and a disciplined poise from years of pushing herself to stand out among recruits. Her brown hair was braided low beneath her navy beanie, and her winter patrol coat clung tightly to her athletic frame. Sharp, blue-gray eyes swept the trail ahead, vigilant yet edged with the restless curiosity of someone who still believed she could make a difference. She'd only recently completed an advanced tactical certification. Today should have been a routine patrol, except a Timber North supply truck had been reported entering a restricted section of the ridge before dawn. So now she followed tire tracks winding deeper into the woods, her boots crunching through layered snow. Ainsley lifted her radio. "Dispatch, Cross entering the ravine path. Following vehicle tracks, will advise." Static answered her. She tried again. Nothing. The ridge often swallowed radio signals whole. The ravine tightened around her, its stone walls slick with a veneer of frost. Snow muted all sound. Ainsley slowed, hand hovering near her holster. Something about the air felt too still. The tracks ahead led into a bottleneck where trees choked the path. Then, a flash, a snap, a rifle's crack tearing through the winter hush. Pain exploded through her shoulder, ripping the breath from her lungs. She staggered back, a second shot grazing the side of her ribs, spinning her toward a fallen branch. Her radio sparked violently, a bullet having clipped its casing. Snow turned red beneath her knees. More shots struck bark around her. Someone was firing with precision. Ainsley pressed her palm to her wound, teeth clenched, adrenaline burning through shock. "Move," she told herself. She crawled, slow, dragging, determined, toward the thicker trees. The world blurred as she reached the massive trunk of a pine whose roots spread like gnarled hands beneath a burial of snow. She slumped against it, breaths shallow, consciousness slipping. Far below the ridge, the smell of hay mixed with antiseptic drifted from a warmly lit veterinary clinic on Elm Street. Nora Beckett, nearing 60, moved carefully between kennels, her silver hair tied into a loose bun that let strands fall around her lined, gentle face. A sturdy woman with soft brown eyes, Nora carried the calm presence of someone who had spent decades soothing frightened animals, and sometimes frightened people. Her clinic had begun, struggling in recent years, but she refused to close its doors. Her grandson, Jake, a 10-year-old with a mop of blonde curls and a jacket 2 sizes too big, sat on a stool sorting bandage rolls. He adored his grandmother and spent afternoons helping whenever school let out early. "Gran, another coyote?" he asked, pointing to the injured animal resting in a crate. Nora frowned, slipping on gloves. "That's the third one this month with the same wound pattern." She held up a flattened bullet fragment recovered from the animal. See this marking? Spiral grooves like these come from a very specific type of rifle. Jake squinted. Is that bad? Nora didn't answer right away. Something about these injuries gnawed at her. Too clean, too deliberate, too similar. But she didn't want to frighten the boy. She simply smiled, though worry creased her brow. It's unusual, sweetheart. That's all. Across town, in Snowbridge's only cafe, the low murmur of morning conversations swirled around the smell of burnt espresso and wood smoke. At a corner table, Mayor Raymond Stanton, a tall man in his 50s with perfectly combed salt and pepper hair and an expensive overcoat, leaned forward over a cup of black coffee. His smooth voice had a practiced charm, but the tension in his jaw betrayed irritation. Opposite him sat Charles Haverly, the broad-shouldered owner of Timber North. His flannel collar was dusted with sawdust, and his leathery face held the impatience of a man used to getting his way. You said it would be handled, Stanton muttered under his breath. Haverly scratched his beard, avoiding the mayor's gaze. It'll be handled. But your fundraising event won't matter if Cross keeps poking around where she shouldn't. Keep your voice down, Stanton snapped, forcing a smile as a barista passed by. Nothing more was said aloud, but the strain in their faces suggested something at Timberline was spiraling out of control. Back on the ridge, the storm thickened, dark clouds rolling like bruises across the sky. Elias Ward, 27, trudged up the snowy incline with the steady, disciplined stride of a soldier who had learned to respect every inch of terrain. His tall, lean frame was wrapped in a heavy jacket, and his sandy blonde hair, damp from melting snow, peeked from beneath a knit cap. His pale blue eyes held a quiet heaviness, remnants of a battlefield he'd left behind, but carried inside him still. Beside him bounded Coda, a 5-year-old German shepherd with a sable coat and a noble, intelligent posture. Coda's ears twitched constantly, scanning the forest with trained vigilance. The dog limped ever so slightly, a reminder of the explosion that injured them both during deployment. Elias had brought Coda to Snowbridge hoping the mountains would calm them both, but calm was shattered in an instant. Coda froze, nose lifted, body tense. "What is it, boy?" Elias whispered, though he already recognized the shift. The dog had picked up a scent. Coda barked once, low, urgent, and darted downhill. Elias followed instantly. They weaved through trees, cold air burning in Elias's lungs. The metallic scent hit him before he saw her. A figure slumped against a pine, snow gathering in her hair, blood blooming dark against her uniform. Elias dropped to his knees. "Hey, stay with me." Ainsley's eyes fluttered open, barely. "Deputy Ainsley Cross," she breathed. "I was following. Timber North." "You're safe now," Elias said, though he wasn't certain of it himself. He checked her wounds, one deep, one grazing. She was losing heat fast. He reached for his phone. No signal. The storm was closing in, suffocating the ridge. Coda paced anxiously around them, whining. Elias lifted Ainsley carefully. She winced but didn't resist. "Hang on," he murmured. "Just a little longer." Through swirling snow, he carried her toward an old hunting cabin half buried in drifts. He kicked the frozen door open, laid her on a cot, and worked swiftly, cleaning blood, layering gauze, coaxing life back into her limbs. Coda curled against her feet, his warm body shielding her from the cold. Outside, the wind screamed against the wood. Inside, the fire Elias built flickered weakly, casting trembling shadows across the cabin walls. He sat beside Ainsley as her breathing steadied, shallow but present. He didn't know who had shot her, or if they were still out there, But until morning came, until the storm broke, he would not let her die alone in the snow. The storm thickened as night settled over Timberline Ridge. Wind rattled the loose boards of the abandoned hunting cabin, and snow drifted through the cracks like wandering ghosts. Inside, the flicker of a small fire cast trembling light across rough timber walls, revealing the pale, sweat-sheened face of Deputy Ainsley Cross. Elias Ward knelt beside her again, checking the makeshift dressings he'd applied earlier. Her breathing was shallow, uneven. Fever had begun its climb, warming her forehead even as the cold tried to claim the rest of her body. His jaw tensed. He had seen this kind of shock before. Far from any help, inside a collapsing world of ice and pain, Coda lay pressed against Ainsley's legs, sharing precious heat. The German shepherd's ears twitched toward every gust outside. His amber eyes never left the gap beneath the door, as if guarding against shadows the storm had yet to reveal. Ainsley stirred, a soft, broken sound escaping her. "Mom, don't let them call you." "Not yet." Her voice rasped with fear, and the words trailed off into a shiver. Elias leaned closer. "You're okay. Stay with me." Her eyelids fluttered, unfocused. "I was finally trusted. First real assignment, and I blew it." She swallowed painfully. "I can't fail." "You didn't fail anything," Elias said, firm but quiet. "You got ambushed. That's not failure." But she didn't seem to hear. Her head lolled to the side, breath hitching. Blood had begun to seep again through the bandage on her shoulder. Elias exhaled sharply. This was turning fast. He needed to remove the fragment still lodged shallowly beneath the torn muscle before infection set in. He rummaged through his pack, pulling out a small folding blade and a bottle of purified water. He set them on a metal tray he found on a shelf, warming the blade over the fire. His hands were steady, though the memory of similar battlefield procedures haunted the edges of his mind. He pushed them away. This wasn't a battlefield. It was one injured woman and the snow beating at the roof like a drum. "Ainsley," he murmured, "I need you to breathe slow. This will hurt." Her eyes cracked open, glazed with fever. "Are you a medic?" "Not exactly," he replied. "But I've had to do this before." He cleaned the wound again, then made a precise incision. Ainsley gasped sharply, her body arching before Coda pressed closer, grounding her with warmth and steady weight. Elias worked efficiently, fingers steady despite the sweat on his brow. After a tense minute, he lifted the small, blood-coated shard of metal into the light. "That's it," he whispered, dropping it into a tin cup. He redressed the wound carefully, layering gauze and pressure. Ainsley slumped back, breathing hard, then slipped again into a fevered haze. Outside, thunder rolled faintly, a reminder that the world beyond the cabin was still raging. In downtown Snowbridge, the police station lights glowed against the storm, illuminating falling snow like sparks in the dark. Inside the communications room, a red indicator flashed on the dispatch panel. "Loss of contact now 43 minutes, said the night dispatcher, a slender man named Riley Trent, whose wiry frame and constantly tapping fingers showed his anxious disposition. His pale blonde hair stuck to his forehead from stress, and he stared at the radio logs as if willing Ainsley's signal to return. Sheriff Harlan Dalton, a tall, broad man in his mid-50s with a weather-toughened face and steady steel-gray eyes, stood behind him. Dalton gave off the aura of someone carved from mountain stone. Patient, unshakable, but deeply protective of his deputies. "Replay her last transmission," Dalton said. Riley pressed a button. A faint crackle, then Ainsley's voice. "Dispatch, cross entering ravine path following Timber North vehicle. Will advance." The recording cut abruptly. Dalton folded his arms. "Tire tracks. Restricted area. Sudden cutoff. This isn't equipment failure. A younger officer, Maya Torres, stepped forward. She was in her late 20s, sharp-eyed, athletic, with dark curly hair pulled tightly into a bun. Her voice carried a controlled urgency. "Sir, Timber North's trucks don't run that route unless they're avoiding inspection." "I know," Dalton replied. His jaw tightened. "We're not saying anything outside this building, no public alert. But once the storm breaks, we form a search team. I want every ranger and deputy ready." Riley hesitated. "You think Timber North's involved?" Dalton exhaled through his nose. "I think we'd be fools to rule it out." At the veterinary clinic, the storm rattled the windows. Jake sat on a stool flipping through a small phone left accidentally by a wounded lumber worker earlier that day. A rugged man in his 40s who had rushed out after dropping his injured dog, promising to return, but never did. Jake tapped the screen and found a half-typed message. "Warehouse North Sector unstable. Test rounds too volatile. Keep it quiet." His brows knit. "Gran," he called, "this looks important." Nora approached, wiping her hands on her apron. Her tired eyes narrowed as she read the message. "Test rounds. Volatile? And from the northern sector. Timber North owns that stretch." "Is that bad?" Jake asked quietly. Nora didn't answer immediately. She looked toward the back room where 3 injured coyotes rested, each bearing the same spiraled wound track. A chill rippled beneath her skin, colder than the wind outside. Across town, in a dim office smelling of old leather and polished wood, Mayor Stanton rubbed a hand over his face. Stress deepened the lines near his mouth. Charles Haverly stood near the window, watching the snow with a scowl. "The deputy's missing," Haverly muttered. "They'll send people looking. We don't need this." Stanton's gaze hardened. "Then make sure your men keep their mouths shut. Timber North promised stability in this town. I expect you to uphold that." Haverly's expression twitched, but he nodded. Neither man mentioned the injured animals, the bullet patterns, the warehouse message. But both knew the storm outside was nothing compared to the one slowly building beneath Snowbridge. In the cabin, Ainsley's fever eased slightly. Elias threaded another log into the fire. Coda lifted his head, ears tilting as if listening to something distant. Elias placed a steady hand on the dog's back. "Yeah," he murmured. "I know. Morning can't come fast enough." The storm raged on, sealing them in, a fragile pocket of warmth battling the cold, unaware of the larger shadows gathering across the mountain. Dawn crept along Timberline Ridge in muted gray bands as the blizzard loosened its hold. Ice glistened on every branch, and the air carried the hollow stillness that follows a night of violent weather. Inside the hunting cabin, the fire had dwindled to embers. Elias Ward eased his coat around Ainsley Cross, testing her balance as she tried to stand. She was pale but conscious, her breaths tight from pain. "I can walk," she murmured, though her voice trembled. "You can lean on me," Elias replied, steady and calm. Coda paced near the doorway, tail stiff, nose twitching in restless arcs. The German shepherd's posture signaled more than eagerness to leave. There was unease, a tension coiled beneath his fur. Elias caught it instantly. "What do you smell, boy?" Coda answered with a low growl, then pressed his nose to the snow outside the cabin. 2 distinct impressions marked the drift. Boot prints cutting sharply across the terrain, moving in a deliberate pattern. Ainsley's pulse quickened. She recognized the spacing. "They're tracking someone." "They're tracking us," Elias corrected. His tone remained quiet, but his jaw tightened. The prints were fresh, the stride determined, and scattered among them, Coda pawed at darker flecks, dried blood, likely Ainsley's trail from the night before. Elias glanced toward the tree line. "We need to move." Ainsley gripped his shoulder, fighting dizziness. Two men, armed. They must have circled back. Coda bristled, ears pinned forward. A distant crack of a branch snapped through the frozen stillness. Elias pulled Ainsley behind a fallen log. They crouched low while Coda pressed beside them, muscles taut. Moments later, two figures appeared between the pines. Thick winter jackets, rifles slung low, movements careful and predatory. One was tall and broad-shouldered, with a black beard iced over by the cold. The other shorter, wiry, with darting eyes scanning the ground. Ainsley's breath caught. "I know him. The short one. I saw him at Timber North's North Warehouse. He carried crates out the night I checked the logs." Her recognition sent a chill deeper than the wind. The men paused, inspecting the blood trail. The tall one signaled with two fingers. They followed it. Elias whispered, "We run on my word. When Coda jumps, you move." Coda's body tensed, eyes locked on the approaching threat. His breath steamed in sharp bursts. The tall man lifted his weapon. Coda launched like a bolt of amber lightning. The impact knocked the rifle wide. The man crashed into the snow as Coda hit his chest, teeth clamping onto his coat sleeve. The wiry man spun, startled, raising his gun. "Move!" Elias hissed. He pulled Ainsley with him, dodging behind a cluster of ice-laden spruce. Snow exploded beside them as a shot fired. Elias shifted low, instincts of a seal taking over, circling behind a rock formation, kicking snow deliberately to create offset tracks. "Coda, out!" Elias signaled sharply. The dog disengaged with a leap, sprinting toward Elias and Ainsley as the attackers scrambled to their feet. Gunfire shattered branches overhead. Elias shielded Ainsley as they veered downslope, the terrain narrowing into a corridor of jagged stone. Ainsley gritted her teeth through the pain, one arm wrapped around Elias for stability. "There's a ranger station, old one, half a mile east," she gasped. "If the storm didn't crush it, radio might still work." "Good," Elias said. "We make for it." Behind them, the men's shouts echoed angrily. They were persistent, but the forest favored those who understood its language. Elias guided their descent, stepping lightly on compact snow while kicking loose drifts in the opposite direction to mislead pursuit. Coda darted ahead, then doubled back, ensuring the path was safe. At last, the ranger station appeared through thinning fog, a squat wooden structure with a collapsed porch and boards warped by years of storms. Frost clung heavily to its broken windows. A rusted sign hung crooked. "Timberline Fire Watch. Outpost 3. Ainsley gripped the doorframe as Elias shouldered it open. Inside, dusty shelves and old maps covered the walls. A metal radio sat atop a cracked desk, its antenna bent like an arthritic finger refusing to straighten. Elias helped her into a chair. "You know how to work it?" "Depends on how old it is," she said, forcing a weak smile. He cleared snow from the surface and tapped the side of the radio. The machine sputtered, then whined, static bleeding through the cabin. Ainsley adjusted the frequency dials, her fingers trembling from cold and pain. "Snowbridge Dispatch. This is Cross. Emergency. Officer down. 2 armed suspects in pursuit." More static. Elias took over, tightening the cables, adjusting the gain. The radio crackled again, and then a faint voice broke through, distant but human. "Opie, Cross, repeat your status." Ainsley sagged in relief. "We have contact," Elias whispered. Coda stood guard at the doorway, eyes locked on the woods, body quivering with vigilance. Snowbridge was hearing them. Help would come. But not soon enough to stop what the forest still held. In town, the day thawed slightly beneath weak winter sunlight. Nora Beckett drove her old beige pickup along the road leading to the outskirts, Jake beside her clutching 2 paper bags filled with warm bread and stew packets. "Mrs. Hollard will love this," Jake said, cheerful despite the cold. "She always does," Nora replied, smiling. As they rounded a bend, a Timber North transport truck roared past too fast, fishtailing slightly on the icy road. A metal crate bounced free from the back, hit the ground, and split open. Brass cylinders spilled across the snow in a loud clatter. Nora braked sharply. "Jake, stay in the truck." She stepped out, coat pulled tight against the wind. The spilled ammunition gleamed with a distinctive spiral marking etched near the base, precisely like the fragments she'd removed from the wounded coyote last week. Her chest tightened. Jake leaned out the window, phone in hand. "Gran, these look like the weird ones, right?" Nora nodded slowly, face pale. "Take a picture, then get back inside." Jake snapped several photos, zooming in on the unique grooves. When they reached home, he sat at Nora's desk and accessed Snowbridge Police Department's community tip website. He hesitated only once. Then he uploaded the photos anonymously. At the station, Sheriff Dalton reviewed incoming reports. The new alert flashed. "Anonymous tip, illegal ammunition, Timber North transport. Photo evidence attached." Dalton leaned forward, his expression darkening with realization. This wasn't coincidence. This was the beginning of something much bigger. Snowbridge stirred under a hard, metallic dawn. The storm had thinned, leaving the forest shivering beneath a brittle crust of ice. Sheriff Harlan Dalton guided his snow-tracked patrol vehicle up the Timberline Road. The antenna on his roof straining toward the faint emergency ping Elias had managed to push through the ancient ranger station radio. Dalton's broad shoulders leaned forward over the wheel, his gray eyes narrowing with the instinct of a man who had spent 3 decades answering calls that could break a town. The old outpost appeared through the thinning mist, its wood splintered by storms, the porch half collapsed. But the danger outside overshadowed any decay inside. 2 men stalked the perimeter with rifles in hand, circling the door as if testing it. Both wore dark winter jackets fitted with tactical pockets. One had a beard thick as a thicket and a flattened nose suggesting a history of fighting. The other was the wiry man Ainsley had recognized earlier, his movements sharp and twitchy, eyes constantly scanning the tree line. Dalton cut the engine and stepped out silently, snow crunching under his boots. His breath curled into the cold air as he drew his sidearm. He took cover behind a low boulder just as the taller man slammed his shoulder into the ranger station door. Inside, Coda barked sharply, the deep warning of a cornered guardian. Elias reacted instantly. He positioned himself near the far wall, ready to intercept. Ainsley was propped against a table behind him, wrapped in blankets, her face pale but alert. She listened to the pounding with uneven breaths, fingers tightening around the edge of the cot. The wiry man shouted, "Kick it again! She's bleeding out! They won't get far!" Dalton moved with practiced calculation. When the bearded man lifted his rifle, Dalton stepped from behind the boulder. "Drop it!" The shout ricocheted off the icy trees. Both men spun toward him. A shot cracked. Snow burst beside Dalton's leg. He fired back, forcing them to dive for cover. Elias flung the door open, Coda leaping past him like a streak of living steel. The shepherd lunged at the wiry man, teeth sinking into his forearm. The man screamed, rifle clattering into the snow. The bearded attacker raised his weapon toward the dog, but Elias hit him low, driving a shoulder into his ribs. They both crashed into the snowbank. Dalton moved in swiftly, pinning the wiry man with a knee, while Coda held his arm in a controlled grip. Elias wrestled the second man's rifle away and twisted his wrist until the weapon fell. Snow sprayed as the man struggled beneath him, cursing through clenched teeth. Within seconds, Dalton snapped cuffs onto both men. Coda stepped back, panting, a thin line of blood staining his fur where a bullet had grazed him. Elias knelt to check the wound. Superficial, but burning with risk. He stroked the dog's head firmly. "Good boy, you held the line." The wail of approaching sirens wound through the trees. Backup, drawn by Dalton's call. Paramedics rushed into the outpost. Ainsley blinked up at them as they lifted her onto a stretcher. "You're safe now," Elias told her, though his voice caught faintly. She managed a weak nod, her hand brushing against his for a fleeting moment before the medics carried her outside. A helicopter thumped overhead, blades slicing the frozen air. Its searchlight flickered across the clearing as it descended. Snow swirled violently when the stretcher was loaded, and Elias stepped back, shielding his eyes from the downdraft. Dalton stood nearby, broad stance braced against the force. As the helicopter rose, Elias watched the silhouette of Ainsley inside. Small, still, fragile beneath the medical blankets. His chest tightened, a storm of fear and something deeper stirring beneath his ribs. Coda pressed against his side as if sensing the weight inside him. The helicopter tilted toward the horizon and vanished beyond the ridge. Dalton rested a hand on Elias's shoulder. "She's heading to the best trauma unit in the region. She fought hard. That counts." Elias nodded, though his eyes lingered on the empty sky. 2 days later, the investigation broke open like a frozen river cracking under thaw. Ballistics reports from the state lab arrived first. The fragments taken from Ainsley's shoulder wound bore a distinct spiral rifling pattern. An unusual twist rate found in a specific rifle batch, traced to illegal imports from Idaho. The same markings appeared on the bullet removed from the deer Nora had treated, and on the ammunition Jake had photographed spilling from the Timber North truck. On each casing, faint but identifiable, was the manufacturing lot number, LN47X. Dalton's expression hardened as he read the report. This was no coincidence. It was a chain leading directly to Timber North's doorstep. When interrogated, the two captured attackers, now identified through federal database hits as contract enforcers from out of state, split their story under pressure. The wiry man broke first. "It was Stanton," he stammered. "Mayor Stanton. He paid Haverly to get rid of the deputy, said she was digging in places she didn't belong." The bearded man snarled, but eventually added the missing pieces. "Timberline route was perfect. Quiet. No patrols at night. We moved crates up and down, rifles, handguns, whatever came in from Idaho. Cross got too close." Dalton felt a cold that had nothing to do with winter. He called for a warrant. The mayor's office, once immaculate, now brimmed with evidence. Officers pulled out a ledger containing irregular cash entries labeled under fake community grants. Hidden in a locked drawer was a folded map. The Timberline Ridge circled in red ink with a note. "Safe testing zone. No patrol interference. Exactly where Ainsley's body would have ended up if Elias hadn't found her." Stanton was arrested at City Hall, still wearing his pristine overcoat. Charles Haverly was taken into custody at the Timber North compound, while federal agents sealed the warehouse and seized crates of unregistered firearms. Snowbridge watched the news unfold with a shock that rippled through every diner, grocery store, and living room. Justice had been buried under ice for too long, but now it had surfaced, and the ridge, silent as ever, seemed to breathe easier. The snow along Timberline Ridge no longer fell in heavy curtains, but drifted lightly in the wind, dissolving into air before touching the ground. Days had grown brighter, the sun lingering a little longer over Snowbridge as if watching the town emerge from its long-held breath. Within the regional medical center, sunlight reached through tall windows and spilled across Deputy Ainsley Cross's bed. She sat propped against pillows, her shoulder bound in clean dressings, her breathing steady. The bruises along her ribs had begun to fade into lighter shades of blue. Despite the lingering fatigue, her eyes had regained their sharp clarity. Every morning brought a mix of gratitude and the quiet determination to reclaim the life stolen from her atop Timberline. The door opened gently. Elias Ward entered carrying a paper cup of hot cocoa and an awkward attempt at a smile. His sandy hair was still tousled from the wind outside. He wore a thick forest green jacket, dark jeans, and boots dusted with snow. Behind him padded Coda, tail swinging lazily, his bandaged side healed enough for him to walk with his usual calm confidence. Ainsley brightened visibly. "You again," she teased. "Doctor said cocoa helps recovery," Elias replied, setting the cup on her bedside table. "And Coda insisted on checking your vitals." Coda placed his front paws gently on the edge of the bed and offered a soft whine. Ainsley scratched behind his ears, smiling when the shepherd closed his eyes in bliss. Their daily visits had become a rhythm she didn't realize she needed. Elias often sat beside her, speaking in the gentle tone of someone who understood how silence sometimes carried more weight than words. He told her about the mountains he used to hike, the oceans he was deployed across, and the nightmares he no longer tried to hide. She shared how she had always wanted to serve Timberline, how proving herself mattered too much, how fear crept in when she thought she'd never stand again. One afternoon, as the sky paled toward evening, Ainsley said quietly, "You shouldn't feel responsible for what happened up there." Elias shook his head. "I don't feel responsible. I feel grateful that I was there, that I got the chance to pull someone out when it mattered." His honesty softened the lingering ache in her chest. There were moments when their conversations fell into gentle silence, where the only sound was Coda's steady breathing at their feet. Those quiet intervals felt like healing, like something fragile but real taking root. While Ainsley recovered, Snowbridge continued its own renewal. Dr. Nora Beckett's clinic bustled with volunteers installing new diagnostic equipment, purchased using the state grant she received. Nora stood outside her newly repaired sign, cheeks flushed from pride and winter air. Her silver hair fluttered as she guided workers into the kennel wing. Jake stood proudly beside her, wearing a blue ribbon pinned to his coat. Community Service Recognition Award. His photograph had appeared in the local paper, celebrating his anonymous tip that helped crack the case. The boy's grin was wide, infectious, and both he and Nora accepted endless baked muffins from grateful neighbors. The Snowbridge Police Department earned commendations from the State Bureau. Officers moved through the halls with renewed confidence, their badges glinting a little more brightly. Legal consequences came swiftly and decisively. Former Mayor Raymond Stanton faced sentencing in federal court, 35 years without parole for conspiracy to commit murder, bribery, and facilitating illegal arms trafficking. Charles Haverly, the Timber North owner, received 27 years for federal weapons violations and transporting unregistered firearms across state lines. The two hired gunmen were tried separately. The shooter responsible for Ainsley's wounds, 40 years. The assailant who fought Elias and Coda, 18 years. No deals, no secrecy. Every hearing was public, attended by townspeople who needed to see justice restored. The remaining Timber North employees, innocent workers blindsided by their employers' crimes, were offered new job placements by the county. For the first time in years, Snowbridge felt like a community pulling together rather than unraveling. Weeks passed, and winter slowly surrendered. Ainsley was released from the hospital on a mild afternoon when the last patches of snow clung stubbornly to shady corners of Timberline Ridge. As she stepped outside, Adjusting the strap of her sling, she spotted Elias leaning beside his truck, Coda sitting proudly at his side. Elias held a warm, charcoal-gray winter coat in his hands. "Thought you might need something better than the one they cut off you," he said, trying to play it casual. She accepted the coat, brushing her fingers against his. "Thank you," she replied softly. "And if you ever plan on patrolling Timberline again," he added, half smiling, "you should probably call me. For backup." Ainsley slipped on the coat, the warmth surprising her. "I'll call you," she said, meeting his eyes. "But only if Coda comes too." Coda barked once, as though signing a contract. They began walking along the trail leading behind the parking lot, where melting snow dripped from branches and the scent of pine mingled with damp earth. Coda trotted between them, occasionally nudging Ainsley's hand as if guiding her forward. Words felt unnecessary. Their steps fell into an easy cadence. The quiet between them was no longer the silence of fear or uncertainty, but the gentle space where trust grows. As the sun slipped behind the ridgeline, casting golden threads across the melting snow, Elias glanced at her. "You doing okay?" Ainsley inhaled the crisp air, feeling steady for the first time in weeks. "I think," she said softly, "I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." They continued walking. Two battered souls and one steadfast dog, along the timberline path that had once almost ended everything, and now had given them something startlingly new. A place to heal, a place to return to, a place to begin. Sometimes the greatest miracles arrive quietly, not in thunder or fire, but in the steady footsteps of a loyal dog, in the courage of a wounded officer who refuses to give up, and in the unexpected kindness that appears when two lives cross in a moment of darkness. Stories like Ainsley, Elias, and Coda remind us that even in the harshest winters of our lives, the Lord's gentle hand can guide the lost toward safety, bring healing to the broken, and lead strangers to become family. May this tale be a small reminder that hope is never truly gone. It simply waits for the right moment to return. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Tell someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to the channel so more people can feel this warmth. And may the gracious blessings of the Lord watch over you and your loved ones, protecting you through every storm and lighting your path toward peace. God bless you.